Welcome back to the deep dive for our third deep dive.
It's great to be back.
It's always good to have you here. Now, last time we were getting into the ethical side of things, right? Like the decisions businesses make, values-driven things. Like, what do they prioritize?
Yeah, all those ethical considerations. It really is a minefield for businesses to navigate, isn't it?
Total minefield. Yeah, and yes, it's fascinating to see how much those choices, those ethical choices, can really impact everything, from the people who work there to how people see the brand, the whole reputation.
Absolutely, and it's something that consumers are paying more and more attention to these days.
Definitely. Okay, well, speaking of big impacts today, we're diving into something that affects all of us. I mean, literally the planet. We're talking about the environmental impact of business.
Oh, this is a huge one.
It's massive, right? But don't worry, we're going to break it down, extract those fascinating nuggets just for you. And the thing is, businesses, they can be the heroes of the environmental story, but they can also be, well, let's just say not so heroic.
Yeah, you're right. It's not always black and white. There are so many factors at play, and the decisions businesses make can have ripple effects that we might not even realize.
Totally. So to kick things off, let's put on our detective hats for a minute.
Oh, I like this.
Right? Let's get investigative and uncover some of those not-so-heroic impacts. What are some ways businesses, ones maybe we even interact with every day, can negatively impact the environment?
Okay, well, one of the most obvious ones, and I think we've all experienced this, is waste. I mean, just think about all that packaging you see at the grocery store or, when you order something online.
Oh, yeah. That mountain of cardboard boxes.
Exactly. So much of it ends up in landfills.
I know I'm totally guilty of contributing to that mountain myself. But it's not just the stuff we can see, right? What about like those stories you hear about water being contaminated near factories and industrial areas?
Right, that's chemical pollution. And it can have devastating consequences. Chemicals from improper waste disposal can leach into the soil and water, and it's really harmful to ecosystems and even entire communities.
It's really scary to think about the long-term impact of that kind of pollution. And then there's the traffic. I feel like I spend half my life stuck behind delivery trucks these days.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. And that's another impact we can link back to businesses. The rise of online shopping and, those just-in-time deliveries has put way more trucks on the road. And that contributes to air pollution and, of course, those traffic jams we all love so much.
And let's not forget about all the people driving to and from work or to the stores.
You're absolutely right. It all adds up.
It's like this domino effect, One business decision leads to another, and the environmental impact just keeps rippling outwards.
Precisely. And it's not just pollution we need to think about either. That constant hum you might hear if you live near a factory or a construction site.
Oh, yeah?
That's noise pollution. And it can be incredibly disruptive to nearby residents and also to wildlife.
Okay, so we've uncovered some pretty serious environmental downsides here. It's almost enough to make you want to go off the grid and live in a cave somewhere.
I hear you. But before we all become hermits, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the heroes of this story, the concept of sustainability.
Okay, because I feel like that word sustainability, it gets thrown around a lot these days.
Yeah.
But what does it actually mean in the context of business?
That's a great question. At its core, sustainability is about meeting our needs today without messing things up for future generations, so they can meet their needs too.
So it's about finding that balance between, I guess, growing the economy and making sure people have good lives, but also protecting the environment.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that those three things are interconnected. We can't have one without the others.
Okay, so it's definitely bigger than just like planting a few trees or using recycled paper, right? It's about a much more fundamental shift in how businesses do things.
That's right. It's about looking at the whole picture, from the resources they use to the waste they generate to the emissions they pump out.
So how do they actually put that into practice? What are like the key principles of running a truly sustainable business?
Well, one fundamental principle is resource reduction. It's about figuring out ways to use less stuff, like switching to digital communication to cut down on paper usage or using recycled materials instead of always going for brand new ones.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like being mindful of how much you use at home, but on a much larger scale.
Right.
Right? So what about all the waste businesses produce? Is there a way to make that more sustainable?
Absolutely. Waste minimization is key. Businesses can start composting programs, partner with recycling facilities, and even redesign their products so there's less waste to begin with.
I've actually been trying to get better at composting at home, and it's amazing how much less garbage I have. Imagine if businesses really embrace that.
The impact would be huge. And of course, we can't forget about renewable energy. Investing in solar panels, wind turbines, those kinds of clean energy sources, it's a major step towards getting away from those harmful fossil fuels.
Right. It seems like those solar panels are popping up everywhere these days, which is a good sign.
Yeah.
But what about real-world examples of businesses actually putting all this into practice? Are there any companies out there really walking the sustainability walk?
There are, actually. And one that comes to mind is Marks and Spencer. You probably know them. They're a pretty big presence on the high street.
Wait, M&S, like the place where I buy my...
Exactly. That M&S. They've actually become quite well known for their sustainability efforts.
Wow, I wouldn't have guessed that. I mean, I wouldn't have thought of them as being at the forefront of the sustainability movement.
They've made some pretty significant commitments. They have this initiative called Plan A, which aims to make them a net zero business by 2040.
Okay, hold on. Net zero, what does that even mean?
So net zero means that a company balances out the greenhouse gases it releases with the amount it removes from the atmosphere.
So it's like a balancing act, right?
Yeah.
You reduce the bad stuff and you invest in things that absorb carbon dioxide, like planting trees.
Exactly. And M&S is taking this seriously. They're tackling sustainability on multiple fronts, from cutting back on their energy use to sourcing their materials in a more sustainable way. And one of their most interesting initiatives is this thing called swapping. Have you heard of this?
Swapping. It rings a bell, but refresh my memory. What is that exactly?
So basically, they encourage their customers to bring in their old clothes, the ones they don't want anymore, and M&S will recycle them or reuse them. It's a great way to keep clothes out of landfills and give them a second life.
Oh, yeah. That's a great idea. I have a whole bag of clothes I need to get rid of. I'll have to check that out.
You should. It's a really good example of how M&S is getting their customers involved in this whole sustainability thing. But they're doing a lot more behind the scenes, too.
Like what? Give me the juicy details. Like what? Give me the juicy details.
Well, for one, they're really focused on sustainable sourcing. Like, they're committed to getting 100% of their cotton from sustainable sources, which means it's produced in a way that's better for the environment and the farmers.
That's amazing. So that cotton shirt you get from M&S, it actually has a more sustainable story behind it than you might realize.
Exactly. And it makes you think about the impact of our choices as consumers, right?
Yeah, for sure. It does feel a bit overwhelming, though. Like, where do you even start? What can businesses or even just individuals like you and me actually do to make a difference?
That's a really important question. And I think it's empowering to realize that we're not powerless in this situation. We can all make choices that have a positive impact.
So where do we start?
Well, how about we start with something we all deal with every single day, packaging. I don't know about you, but all that excess packaging drives me crazy. It feels so wasteful.
Oh, tell me about it. It's like you order something tiny and it comes in this huge box filled with plastic and styrofoam.
Right. So what are some alternatives you've seen out there? Have you noticed any companies doing things differently?
I have. I've seen some companies using those compostable mushroom-based packaging material.
Oh, yeah, I've seen those too.
It's incredible what they can do with fungi these days.
It really is. And it's a great example of how businesses can move away from traditional plastics. There's also the classic refillable container model, right? Like those zero waste shops where you bring your own containers.
I love those places. It just feels so much better to be part of that kind of circular system. And speaking of reducing waste, we can't forget about recycling.
Absolutely. Recycling should be a no-brainer for any business. I mean, it's just common sense, right? Diverting waste from landfills, giving materials a second life. Imagine if every business had a solid recycling program.
I feel so good when I meticulously sort my recycling at home. I know it's a small thing, but it makes a difference. But what about all the driving we do? Is there a way to make our commutes more eco-friendly? I have actually been trying to cycle to work more often, and it's surprisingly enjoyable.
I love cycling too. It's great exercise, and it's good for the planet. And that's a perfect example of what we call green commuting. Businesses can encourage their employees to bike, walk, carpool, or use public transport. Some companies even offer incentives or subsidies to make those options more appealing.
That's awesome. And, those rooftop solar panels, they seem to be popping up everywhere these days. Feels like clean energy is finally becoming more accessible, which is great. But can businesses actually get in on that action too?
For sure, investing in renewable energy sources like solar or wind power, it's a smart move for businesses. It's not just about reducing their carbon footprint, but it can also save them a lot of money in the long run.
So it's a win-win. You get to be good to the planet and potentially save some cash. I like it. But I imagine that switching to solar can be a pretty big investment for a business, right? What if those long-term savings don't materialize?
Well, the initial cost can definitely be a barrier for some businesses, but solar panel technology has come a long way. It's becoming much more affordable, and the payback period is getting shorter. Plus, there are often government incentives and tax breaks available to help businesses make that transition.
That makes sense. It's kind of like with any new technology. The early adopters pay a premium, but as it becomes more mainstream, the prices start to come down. Okay, but besides the cost, what other challenges do businesses face when trying to be more environmentally friendly?
That's a good point because it's not always easy. One of the biggest hurdles can be the complexity of it all. It's one thing to say you want to be sustainable, but actually implementing those changes throughout a business that can be really tough.
I imagine it's like turning a giant ship around.
Yeah.
It takes time, coordination, a whole lot of effort.
Exactly. It requires a lot of planning, employee training, a willingness to adapt along the way. And then there's the issue of competition. If a business focuses too much on sustainability and their costs go up, they could end up losing customers to companies that aren't as eco-conscious.
That's a good point. It really is a balancing act, right? But it seems like there are some real benefits to being a sustainable business,
Yeah.
beyond just doing the right thing for the planet.
Yeah, there are. And the business case for sustainability is getting stronger all the time. Consumers are becoming much more aware of these issues, and they're voting with their wallets. They're choosing to support businesses that align with their values.
Interesting. So you really think that people are considering a company's environmental practices when they're shopping? I'd like to think so, but I'm not convinced everyone does.
They might not be doing it consciously all the time, but there's a whole segment of consumers, especially younger generations, who are actively seeking out eco-friendly products and services. They're willing to pay more for things that are produced sustainably and ethically.
So it's not just about being ethical. It's actually a smart business strategy.
Exactly. And being green is a powerful marketing tool, too. It allows companies to tell a positive story about their brand and really connect with those eco-conscious consumers.
Right. So it's not just another product on the shelf. It's the ethical, sustainable option.
Exactly. And then there's the whole issue of compliance. Environmental regulations are becoming stricter all over the world. Businesses that are ahead of the game on sustainability are much less likely to run into legal problems down the road.
That's a really good point. So it's not just about avoiding penalties. It's about being a leader in the sustainability movement and showing that you're serious about it. And we talked earlier about the cost savings from using less energy and resources. It's pretty cool to think that you can do something good for the planet and maybe even boost your profits at the same time.
That's the beauty of sustainability. It's not about choosing one or the other. It's about finding solutions that work for everyone, the planet, and the bottom line.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. We've seen how businesses can have both positive and negative effects on the environment. We've explored the principles of sustainability and looked at how companies like M&S are putting those principles into action. And we've talked about the challenges and opportunities that come with this whole idea of a more sustainable approach to business.
It's been a fascinating discussion for sure, but I think it's important to remember that sustainability is an ongoing journey. There's always more we can learn and more we can do to make things better.
Absolutely. It's not about reaching a destination, it's about heading in the right direction. And that brings us to our final thought for today. Given what we've learned, what are some truly innovative solutions that you think businesses could implement to minimize their impact on the planet?
Ooh, that's a great question. And one that I hope all our listeners will ponder. What groundbreaking ideas and solutions come to mind?
It really is something to think about. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the environmental impact of business.
It's been a pleasure exploring all this with you.
A huge thank you to all of you for joining us on this journey.
Yes, thanks for tuning in, everyone.
And of course, a special thanks to Google Notebook LM for the audio dialogue and powerful AI assistance.
It's been an amazing tool for this deep dive.
This episode was a PEELC Strategy production to support those studying GCSE business studies or anyone just interested in learning more about business.
We hope you found this deep dive insightful and engaging.
We really hope it's given you a fresh perspective on the complex relationship between business and the environment.
A topic that affects all of us.
It really does. And sustainability, it's not just a trend. It's essential.
Absolutely. We all need to play our part. Consumers, citizens, businesses, everyone.
So keep exploring, keep asking those tough questions, and keep pushing for change.
Let's create a more sustainable future together.
One deep dive at a time. Thanks again for listening.